Why, hello. I'm out here to talk, maybe. I'm here to talk about holiday traditions related to trees and food forests. What are these frankincense and myrrh, anyway? Yule logs, chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost, I don't know. All of these traditions, though, the Yule log, the Christmas tree, the holly and the ivy, even all of the fancy exotic spices that we use in our holiday treats, all of these center around trees and tree products. Why? Why is it that trees are such an important part of the holiday season and that we adorn the whole season with green and with trees? I don't think it's a coincidence. I'm going to tell you why in a moment. Why so many of our songs, so many of our holiday traditions have to do with trees. So yes, here I am today talking about some holiday traditions around trees. What holiday traditions can you think of that have to do with trees? Here in this book I've got here beautiful abundant food forests. I actually have a section in here on seasonal traditions, or different sections on seasonal traditions. I'm going to tell you about some that have to do with winter. But think about it. Why is it that the three wise men in that traditional myth are considered to have brought frankincense and myrrh as gifts? Gifts that at the time were more valuable than gold. And why is it that we use Christmas trees? Why is it that we have wassailing in orchards? Why is it that that we think of the Yule log in this season, and that we think of the holly and the ivy and all of this? Well, I think it's not a coincidence at all. And, I wish I could show you pictures. I guess here on YouTube you can't do that. I don't think you can do that. Let's see if I push some buttons here. Oh, retouch. Oh, look at me. I look extra smooth. I guess I can't do that here on YouTube. I usually do that on different channels, or over on TikTok and on Instagram. I'd be able to show you some really cool pictures of some holiday traditions that go way back. Ancient traditions, really. Why frankincense and myrrh? Why were these two important gifts? A lot of people don't even know what frankincense and myrrh are these days, but they are resins, aromatic and medicinal resins of trees, of torchwood trees. And these resins were worth more than their weight in gold back in the time. And myrrh, in particular, was used in ceremonies. It was a very ceremonial thing. It was used to help preserve bodies. And frankincense was also a favored incense of monks and of religious ceremonies and rites. And both of these come from trees that were found in the Horn of Africa and in South Arabia. But back in the day, these two products were so important to the ancient world that they were one of the most important things traded in the ancient spice route that stretched from China through India all the way to Africa and all the way up through Europe. And so part of what made this conveyor belt of trade from China to Europe and Africa work was the trade of frankincense and myrrh. So back in the day, seeing three people who were very worldly and well-traveled arriving, one might have thought they had come along the spice trade. And that actually goes back even prior to biblical times. So what to me is very important is that these were trees that were originally found in Africa and then transferred and planted and transplanted all the way across the region as far south as into India, where they became popular as part of the food forest systems there. And what we know now is that all along this ancient spice route, all along the ancient spice trade route, we planted forests of food and fuel and medicines and valuable products like these incenses. And for example, in the Tanshan region between Pakistan and China and Tibet, there were forests of apricot and other nuts, apricots and walnuts. Further west we go, we've been to like Kyrgyzstan, modern day Kyrgyzstan. We had apple walnut forests, and then in the Caucasus we had pear and walnut forests. And moving into Europe, forests of hazelnuts and chestnuts and a variety of fruits. And all throughout this region, wherever trees could be traded, they were traded and exchanged. And of course, down into India, where there were the food forests that I always talk about, the ones that still exist today and are very important today. And back then, they were an important part of the spice world, the spice route, and the trade routes of the ancient world. And everywhere throughout this entire region, trees were one of the most valuable things that was traded and planted. So all along that spice route, we now know humans planted these trees. It was where walnuts were spread and cultivated. It's where we domesticated almost all of our major fruits of today were all domesticated along that same line. By the way, thank you for joining me to talk about some holiday traditions around trees and food forests. So what we start to get is that in all of those regions throughout the ancient world, there were all of these sorts of traditions. And before we get into that more, I'd actually like to read you a little bit about this, because I feel like I put this into words better here in this book, which has different chapters about different seasonal traditions from around the world. And it's interesting to know that in this season that we adorn with trees and greenery, there were myths and traditions about trees and forests all over the northern hemisphere. Why? Why is this? In part, I've already said it. Trees were more than just landscaping back then. Trees were life, and they were wealth, and they were some of the most valuable property that we could have to enhance people's lives. And the products of those trees are important even today. So we'll talk more about that. I wish I could show you pictures. You'll just have to look at some of the pictures from my food forests in winter. Because food forests are also beautiful places in the winter. Seasons in a food forest, winter traditions, myths, and recipes. They're recipes too. I'm not going to cook for you. It's the internet. I can't cook for you. I can maybe show you pictures. I can show you pictures of my roasted artichoke Jerusalem soup. It actually tastes a lot better than it looks, but you know. Anyway, so In the winter, the world grows quiet enough for old stories to be heard again. In many traditions, in the winter, the green man goes to sleep, his breath stilled beneath the bark of oak and ash as he dreams the next season. It is the season of rest, of reset, of vision and planning. It's the time when we plan our food forest for next year, our permaculture gardens. As we evolved among the trees, so our myths and traditions grew out of the forest. All across the northern hemisphere, the story began with the ancient tree, Yggdrasil, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, the cosmic tree. All throughout the northern hemisphere, where trees were so important to our survival and thrival, there are myths of ancient sacred trees and the relationship with humans. Across North America, myths to the great tree were widespread. A great tree that held the nations together. This was a myth in a lot of different Native American nations and tribes. A sacred tree, a giant tree that formed a bridge to the spirit world. Native American nations burned cedar in the winter in purification rituals and fasts, which is very similar again to how people throughout the other region, the region of Eurasia, used frankincense and myrrh. It was interesting to know that here in North America, we did the same thing with cedar. And we also have another tree that's very common around here that is actually our only relative to those torchwood trees that we get frankincense and myrrh from. By the way, do you know what it is? You can throw it in the chat. Win a prize. I'll tell you what it is. Actually, it's and it too is very popular in the Mediterranean region. Sumac, staghorn sumac. Staghorn sumac we of course use because the berries produce a lemony resin that's a very similar sort of resin to the resins found in frankincense and myrrh. The staghorn sumac, we love to use it to make lemonade and things like that. But that resin also is very aromatic and can be burned in an incense. It's an incense that I've played around with. So we do have several North American species that are good for that purpose and that were traditionally used in the same way. In this time, holy people of the Navajo and the Haudenosaunee speak stories of the first tree and of the first forest. Just as they told stories and prepared for the new year, we use this time to think of our plantings and our designs for the new gardens of the new year. In the ancient traditions of Asia, sacred trees hosted spirits such as those trees called shinboki in Japan's Shinto faith, which were vessels for spirits called kami. If you're a fan of Miyazaki films and you know My Neighbor Totoro, or you know those films, you may have seen the trees inhabited by spirits, these spirits called kami. In winter shrines in Japan, they renew the decorations on the sacred trees, on these shinboki trees, as a form of spiritual cleansing and welcoming the kami for the new season. Tending those trees in the winter months by keeping them pruned and keeping them free from heavy snows was seen not just as a practical thing to do, but as an offering from the community of humans to the kami. Which is very interesting how similar that is to traditions of wassailing in orchards throughout Europe and throughout Eurasia, for cider in particular. So part of the idea of wassailing was taking the cider and honoring the trees and the tree spirits, very similar to the kami. They may have called them fae and fairies, but honoring those tree spirits with gifts of song and of drink of the cider. And so it's so interesting to know that all of these tree legends and all these tree traditions that we find and celebrate around Christmas are also have songs in them. We today sing "O Christmas Tree," and we sing about a partridge in a pear tree, and we sing all of these songs. All of "Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly." All of these kinds of songs still integrated in with these myths around trees and forests. In Northern Europe, Yggdrasil held the 9 realms together, very similar to the ideas of the Haudenosaunee, uh, the idea of a great tree holding the nations together. I think about that. When I think about that, I think about how all of these tree myths and how trees are so important to us and our ideas of thriving and survival, that it would make sense to make trees symbols of this season, knowing that we all love trees and that trees hold us together. When the nights grew longest, people believed that if the cosmic tree endured through the winter, the whole world would survive to see spring. Bringing greenery indoors became a reminder of the dark season was not an end, only the still point before rebirth, the beginnings of ecological succession. In apple-growing regions, the orchard held its own winter myths. Wassailers roamed the sleeping trees, singing and offering cider to the roots to wake up the orchard spirits. Other myths wove winter with mystical trees. The oak king and the holly king, locked in their yearly dance, marked the turning of the seasons. In this story, the victory of light is tucked inside an acorn, held beneath the blanket of snow, waiting beneath the snow to bring the next year's light. At solstice, the oak king is reborn, bringing back into the world the light for the new season. These are very ancient stories from Europe's past. And I'm not saying this to make trees the reason for the season or to take away from anything else, but the way I see it is this. To me, it's important to know that all throughout the Northern Hemisphere, despite whatever people's beliefs were, there were ideas and myths about hope for the new season, about the bringing of light for the new season, about the rebirth of light in the new year. And however it is that you interpret that and you see it, it's interesting to me to know that trees sent their own witnesses to this symbolic rebirth of hope, frankincense and myrrh, because trees have always been a part of who we are and how we thrive. They're our long and old companions, and whenever we value trees and honor their witness to us as a species, we thrive. And that, to me, is something important to remember. And this has been true for a very long time. In fact, now we know that in this very region that our minds go to, in this season, in extreme ancient Palestine, an area that we would now consider Palestine, scientists have found the remnants of food forest systems that are more than 300,000 years old. 300,000 years we have been building forests of food. Archaeologists have found that people assembled trees and were burning and managing the ecosystem to create forests and forest environments filled with the best types of foods. These people had forests nearby them that held hundreds of species of edible plants that made up the basis of their diet. In ancient Palestine, 300,000 years ago, before we were even modern humans, we were doing this and had this relationship with trees and food forests. So, at a time when ancient food forests of hazel and chestnut still covered most of Europe, the Yule log was cut from an oak or an ash with special ceremony, representing the heart of the sacred forest itself. Families believed that the sparks of the Yule log became the next year's fruit. Its ashes used to bless fields and orchards and food stores for the new season. Today's Christmas tree still carries echoes of that ancient promise, a beacon of light, rebirth, and renewal, and abundance in the coming year. It's seen as a gift, and even in modern Turkey today, where there were once tree cults devoted to the food forests of pears that they had planted back in the day, and what they called pleasure gardens, these orchards filled with various fruit trees and fruits, figs and mulberries and pears and quinces, which were considered the fruit that it actually wasn't an apple that Eve took from the tree of knowledge. It was a quince, and that tree was considered the tree of knowledge, and it was common back in that area alongside the trees from which we took frankincense and myrrh. So as we walk through, and in that region even today, going back thousands of years, they had sacred trees that they believed that you could go to, and you could hang a replica, a talisman to ward off the evil eye if anybody was coming at you with the evil eye. And by placing this, it would redirect that energy into fulfilling your wishes. So people would make ornaments of these trees and wear them around their necks in the winter season, and adorn the trees with ornaments. Again, if I could show you pictures, I'd show you some of these. So it's a very, very ancient tradition that people would decorate trees at this time of year, hoping to receive their wishes. And these days, we fulfill the wishes right underneath the trees. As we walk through the forest in winter, it is here that we find the true yields of these gardens, because all of these forests that we think of started as anthropogenic gardens. As I mentioned before, those forests of Europe, the forests of Eurasia, the apple walnut forests, the pear forests, all of these, the walnut spread throughout the region, the hazel spread throughout the region, were brought everywhere by humans. And think, today, all of those things are part of the celebration of the season. Nuts and dried exotic fruits. So, as we walk through the forests in winter, it is here that we find the true yields of these gardens are not just fruits and nuts. We join the people who sang to the apple trees, who honored evergreen guardians, who watched the rebirth of light in the oak, and who trusted even in the darkest weeks that the new year will bring fruit and flowers, because we've tended them. And so, in this season, I like to remember that all of these images of trees, of Christmas trees, of holly and ivy, reminders of wassailing and cider and hot cocoa, another tree product, all of these spice cakes and cookies, all of these honor our ancient relationship with forests and with trees, and acknowledge that whenever we humans have honored this relationship with trees, we have thrived. And it has been with trees that we've brought hope into the new season. So, by the way, I was reading from my new book, Beautiful Abundant Food Forest, which I'm happy to say was at least briefly, right now it's back to being an Amazon best new seller, but for a while it was the Amazon bestseller in fruit gardening. I'm very honored that you all have made it that. It's filled with lots of beautiful pictures. I can't show you pictures on here, but I can show you some pictures from my gardens here in this book. I tried to make this book one that's filled with myth and filled with stories and with science. It's both of those things. And almost every page has beautiful pictures, and lots of pictures of my food forests being started and being grown, and some of my favorite food forests that I've been involved in creating. And, as we think maybe one last time about this idea of gifts, even in an annual garden, what we're doing is working for a season. We put in our work and we hopefully get a yield back. But the food forest is something different, because if I put work into a food forest this year, then the food forest will continue to give me back yields for year and year after year after year into the future. Think about that. Think about this. We know now that the apple walnut forest of Kyrgyzstan that the apricot and walnut forests of Galgit-Baltistan, these are thousands of years old. Today, all of the apples, all of the plums, all of the apricots, all of the peaches that we have, all of their genetic diversity, all of the library of genes, to humans thousands of years ago, planting and tending forests. And those forests continue to give back to us today. Even today, when we talk about the apple walnut forest of Kyrgyzstan, they're not just apples and walnuts, they're filled with a diversity of medicinal and edible plants. The same things that would have fascinated people at ancient bazaars along the spice trade exist today. And think about that. They were planted thousands of years ago, and still these gifts continue. So when we invest our time and effort into growing a perennial system like a food forest, if we do the job well and we make something that's truly valuable to people, then we have invested our time into a gift that will give back to us in the future. It's the gift we give ourselves, our future selves, and it can be the gift that we give to generations of humans into the future. And if together we in North America recreate North America as the anthropogenic food forest that it used to be, then we will have given a true gift to future generations of Americans too, and people wherever you are around the world. So thank you for joining me to listen to me talk about seasonal traditions of the food forest in winter. And I hope that you have a great week, and I'll try to be back again soon. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Ciao.